Mehta. Today is World Read Aloud Day, one of my favorite days because I love to read aloud to kids. And today, along with the lovely library, the House of Books and Tales, I'm going to read you a fun folk tale from India. From this series, which is the Folk Tales of India, which is a part of the Discover India series. So today's story is from the state of Gujarat and it's called All for the Best. It's a story about positive thinking, something that we could all do with right now, right? So here's the story. Many years ago, there lived a prosperous king who ruled over a large part of India. He was a kind and generous ruler, and his subjects were very happy. There was peace, harvests were good, there was plenty to eat for everyone, no one was poor, and everyone received justice at the court of the king. The king had many ministers who advised him, but his most trusted advisor was his own uncle, whose name was Rasik Lal. Whenever he had a major problem, Rasik Lal would come to his rescue with the perfect solution. There was just one thing about Rasik Lal that annoyed the king very much. Whenever anything went wrong, Rasik Lal would nod his head very sagely and say, "It's all for the best." "Everything that is bad cannot be for the best," the king would snap. "If I fall ill, how can that be for the best? Or if someone dies, how can that be for the best?" But Rasik Lal would simply smile and say, "You will see, I am right." And the king would shake his head and mutter to himself and say, "I will never understand him." And life would go on as usual. One day, when the king was out hunting, he wandered deep into the forest. He was accompanied by his guards and, of course, the faithful Rasik Lal. As the little group trotted through the jungle, a deer crossed their path. "Your Majesty, that is not a good sign," exclaimed Rasik Lal. "Let's take a different path." "No, this path is good and I want to hunt that very deer," said the king obstinately. He charged off behind the deer. Rasik Lal had no option but to turn his horse and follow the king. After chasing the deer for a few kilometers, the king suddenly stopped and looked around. Rasik Lal they had both left the guards behind and the trees were growing thick around them. They were lost. Surrounded by the thick branches, the king pulled out his dagger to slash his way through the undergrowth. As he did so, he accidentally sliced his own finger off. "Ow!" yelled the king in agony. Rasik Lal rushed to his aid. He bound the king's hand tight to stop the bleeding, but he couldn't do anything with the severed finger, so now the king had no finger. "Don't worry, Your Majesty," Rasik Lal consoled the king. "I have stopped the bleeding and it's all for the best." The king was already in pain and he burst out in anger. "How can losing my finger be for the best? You've lost your mind," he hollered. Suddenly, he heard the sound of chanting nearby. A group of forest dwellers emerged from the trees. They were all dressed up as if they were going for an occasion. Actually, they were looking for a human sacrifice to appease their goddess. When they saw the king, their eyes lit up. "Here is a fine specimen," they cheered. "The goddess will be pleased." "Please, can you show us the way out?" The king thought that they would recognize him. But the forest dwellers had their own rules and laws. They didn't know the king and they didn't care who he was. Even as the king and Rasik Lal protested, they bound them both tight and took him back to their chief. The king was tied to a pole and Rasik Lal looked on helplessly. He didn't know how he could help. The forest dwellers had built a big pile of sticks and kindling under the pole. See there. The fire was about to be lit when the chief suddenly said, "Stop, stop, stop. We have just seen that the king had a missing finger. We cannot give our goddess an imperfect sacrifice," he cried. "Let this man go. We must find a better one. And this other man is too old and useless as a sacrifice." To the king's relief, he and Rasik Lal were set free. Later, as they rejoined the guards, the king admitted to Rasik Lal, "I see what you mean now. It was indeed for the best." And from that day on, he was never again annoyed when Rasik Lal said, "It's all for the best." And that is what our story was about today from the Folk Tales of India, along with the House of Books and Tales. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye-bye.